German Shepherd, was chained to an overflowing dumpster, left to die. What the baby did left everyone in tears. What you're about to listen to will break your heart, then mend it in ways you never thought possible. This story of an abandoned German Shepherd and a 4-year-old boy will leave you in tears. Drop a comment to let us know where you're watching from. Thunder crashed outside the window of the tiny apartment, illuminating the cramped living room for a split second before plunging it back into darkness. 4-year-old Elias pressed his small face against the cold glass, his breath creating foggy circles that expanded and contracted with each exhale. His eyes followed the raindrops racing down the window, his tiny finger tracing their paths until they disappeared at the bottom of the pane. "Elias, sweetie, it's way past your bedtime," Sophie called from the kitchen, where she was sorting through a stack of past-due bills. Her voice was tired, strained from the weight of raising a child alone in a neighborhood that had seen better days. Elias didn't move. Something had caught his attention, something beyond the racing raindrops and flashes of lightning. "Mama," he whispered, his voice barely audible above the storm. "Someone is crying outside." Sophie sighed, setting down the electric bill she'd been staring at for the past 10 minutes. Her son had always had an active imagination, especially during storms. "It's just the wind, baby. Nothing to worry about." She crossed the small living room and knelt beside him, gently brushing his dark curls away from his forehead. "The storm is making all kinds of scary noises tonight. That's why you need to be tucked in your warm bed." Elias turned to look at her, his blue eyes wide and serious. "No, Mama, it's not the wind. Someone is crying. Listen." Sophie paused, humoring her son. She heard the howling wind, the rain lashing against the windows, the occasional rumble of thunder, but nothing that sounded like crying. "Come on, sweetie, time for bed." She scooped him up, his small body feeling lighter than it should for a 4-year-old. They'd been cutting corners with food lately. Sophie pushed away the guilt that threatened to overwhelm her and carried him to his small bedroom. "But Mama," Elias protested as she tucked him under his thin, worn blanket. "No buts," Sophie interrupted gently, smoothing his blanket. "The storm will be gone by morning, and you need your sleep. I'll leave your door open a crack so you can call me if you get scared." She kissed his forehead and turned to leave, but Elias grabbed her hand with surprising strength. "The crying won't stop, Mama. Someone needs help." Sophie looked down at her son, at the tears brimming in his eyes, and felt her heart twist. "It's the wind, baby. I promise. Now try to sleep." She gently extracted her hand from his grip and left the room, leaving the door open a few inches as promised. Back in the living room, she collapsed onto the worn couch, running her hands through her hair. The bills wouldn't pay themselves, and her shift at the diner started at 6 a.m. In his bedroom, Elias lay rigid under his blanket, eyes wide open in the darkness. The crying hadn't stopped. If anything, it sounded weaker now, more desperate. He gripped his blanket tightly, tears sliding silently down his cheeks. The voice in his head told him to stay in bed, to listen to his mother, but his heart pulled him toward the window. He slipped out from under his blanket, his small feet barely making a sound as they touched the cold floor. The crying grew fainter with each passing minute. Whatever was making that sound was giving up. Elias glanced toward his bedroom door. His mother would be angry if she caught him out of bed. But the crying, it sounded so sad, so lost. Someone needed help, and no one was listening. Making his decision, he padded silently to his window and, with some effort, pushed it open. The rain immediately spattered against his face, cold and shocking. The fire escape outside his window was rusted and dangerous. His mother had forbidden him from ever using it, but the crying was coming from the alley below. With a determination that belied his 4 years, Elias climbed carefully out the window. The metal of the fire escape was slippery with rain, and his pajamas were soaked in seconds. The wind whipped around him, threatening to knock his small body off balance, but he clung to the railing and made his way down, one careful step at a time. His bare feet finally touched the wet asphalt of the alley, and he shivered violently in his soaked pajamas. The crying was clearer now, coming from further down the narrow passage between buildings. Elias followed the sound, his heart pounding in his chest. The alley was dark, lit only by the occasional flash of lightning. Garbage overflowed from dumpsters, and broken glass crunched under his feet. He should have worn shoes, he realized too late. But he couldn't go back now. The crying was getting weaker. "Hello?" Elias called, his voice small and frightened. "Are you hurt? I came to help." Another flash of lightning illuminated the alley, and Elias gasped at what he saw. At the end of the alley, chained to an overflowing dumpster, was a dog, a German shepherd, once powerful and majestic, now reduced to skin and bones. The dog's fur was matted with blood and dirt, and open wounds covered its emaciated body. A heavy chain was wrapped tightly around its neck, secured to the dumpster with a thick padlock. The metal had rubbed the dog's neck raw, leaving a bloody, infected collar of flesh. Elias froze, his heart breaking at the sight. The dog's eyes, once proud and bright, were now dull and lifeless, sunken into its skull. It lay in a puddle of filthy water and its own waste, too weak to even hold its head up. As Elias approached slowly, the dog's tail moved, just a slight twitch, but it was something. The crying sound he'd heard was the dog's weak whimpering, now barely audible even up close. "Hi," Elias whispered, kneeling in the filth beside the dog, oblivious to the garbage and broken glass surrounding them. "I heard you crying. I came to help." The dog's eyes, clouded with pain and resignation, shifted slightly to look at the small boy. There was no fear in them, no hope, just a deep exhaustion. This was an animal that had given up. Flies buzzed around the dog's wounds, landing on its eyes only to be weakly blinked away. Its ribs were clearly visible through its skin, and its stomach was sunken so deeply that Elias could see the curve of its spine from the side. This dog hadn't eaten in days, maybe weeks. "You're hurt," Elias whispered, tears filling his eyes. "Who did this to you?" The dog made no response. Its breathing was shallow and labored, each breath seeming to require tremendous effort. Tentatively, Elias reached out his small hand. The dog didn't move, didn't even flinch as the boy's fingers gently touched its face. Its fur, where it wasn't matted with blood, was coarse and filthy. At the touch of the child's hand, the dog let out a faint whimper, not of fear or pain, but something else, something that sounded almost like relief. Then, with what seemed to be the last of its strength, the dog lifted its head just slightly and licked Elias's hand, once, twice, before its head sank back down to the wet pavement. The gesture broke something inside Elias. Tears spilled freely down his cheeks, mixing with the rain on his face. This dog wasn't just hurt, it was dying. Right here, in this alley, chained to a dumpster like it was garbage. "I won't leave you," Elias promised, his voice catching on a sob. "I won't leave you all alone." He looked at the chain, at the heavy padlock securing it to the dumpster. There was no way his small hands could break it, no way he could free the dog on his own. But he couldn't leave it here to die in the cold and the rain. The storm grew more violent, rain driving down in sheets so thick that Elias could barely see. Thunder boomed directly overhead, making him jump, but he didn't run. Instead, he lay down in the filth beside the dying dog, wrapping his small arms around its neck, careful to avoid the worst of its wounds. "I'll keep you warm," he whispered, pressing his face into the dog's dirty fur. "I'll stay with you. You won't be alone anymore." The dog's body trembled, whether from cold or pain, or simply the shock of human contact after what must have been a long period of abuse and neglect. Elias couldn't tell, but he held on tighter, sharing what little warmth his small body could provide. "My name is Elias," he whispered into the dog's ear. "What's your name?" The dog, of course, didn't answer, but its tail twitched again, a tiny, almost imperceptible movement. "That's okay. Mama says I talk enough for two anyway." Elias tried to smile through his tears. "I'm 4 years old. How old are you? You look big, but not as big as Mrs. Peterson's dog from downstairs. But I bet you're a lot nicer." As he spoke, his small voice just audible over the storm, the dog's breathing seemed to steady slightly. Its eyes remained fixed on the boy's face, as if it couldn't quite believe what was happening. "You're a good dog," Elias continued, stroking the dirty fur gently. "A good, brave dog, the very best dog in the whole world. And I'm going to help you, I promise." Another flash of lightning, another crash of thunder. The storm showed no signs of letting up, but Elias didn't care. He would stay here all night if he had to. This dog needed him, and he wouldn't let it down. In his apartment, Elias had a stuffed dog, a German shepherd, just like this one, though his toy was plush and clean and whole, not broken and dying. His father had given it to him before he left. Sometimes when he was scared or sad, Elias would hold that toy close and imagine it was protecting him. Now it was his turn to protect. "Did someone hurt you?" he asked softly, noticing for the first time that some of the wounds on the dog's body seemed intentional, not the result of neglect, but of deliberate cruelty. The thought made his stomach hurt. That was wrong. No one should hurt dogs, or kids, or anyone. The dog's eyes drifted closed, then opened again, with visible effort. Its breathing was growing more labored, each breath a struggle. Panic seized Elias. The dog was slipping away. "No! Please don't go to sleep!" he begged, his voice rising. "Please stay awake. My mama will help you. She can fix anything. Please!" He wrapped his arms more firmly around the dog's neck, as if he could physically keep its life from slipping away. "Please," he sobbed. "Please don't die." The dog's eyes found his again, and in them, Elias saw something change, a tiny spark where before there had been none. With tremendous effort, the dog lifted its head and licked the boy's cheek, catching his tears. It was at that moment that Sophie's scream cut through the storm. "Elias! Oh my God! Elias!" She stood at the entrance to the alley, her hair plastered to her head from the rain, her face contorted with panic and fear. She'd woken to check on him, found his bed empty, his window open to the storm. The sight of her 4-year-old son lying in filth next to a dying, possibly dangerous dog was almost more than her heart could take. "Elias, come here right now!" she screamed, running toward him, splashing through puddles, heedless of the broken glass and garbage. "Mama!" Elias cried, not moving from the dog's side. "Mama, he's dying! He needs me!" Sophie reached them, dropping to her knees beside her son. "Elias, get away from it. It could be sick. It could hurt you." "No, Mama," Elias sobbed, clinging to the dog's neck. "He's good. He's a good dog. Someone hurt him and left him here to die. He licked my hand, Mama. He knows I'm trying to help." Sophie opened her mouth to argue, to drag her son away from the filthy, dying animal. But then she really looked at it. At the deliberate wounds, the chain embedded in its flesh, the resignation in its eyes as it gazed up at her. This wasn't a dangerous stray. This was a victim. "Please, Mama," Elias begged, his blue eyes wide and pleading, tears streaming down his face to mix with the rain. "Please, he's dying. He needs me." Sophie's heart shattered into 1,000 pieces. How could she say no to those eyes? How could she teach her son compassion and then deny him the chance to show it? But a dying dog, their apartment was tiny. They could barely afford food for themselves, let alone veterinary care for a severely injured animal. But the dog's eyes met hers, and something passed between them, a recognition perhaps of two beings who had seen too much hardship. The dog's gaze seemed to say, "I understand if you leave me. Everyone else has." With tears in her eyes, Sophie made her decision. "Okay," she whispered, barely audible over the storm. "Okay, baby, we'll help him." Relief flooded Elias's face. "Really, Mama? We can take him home?" Sophie nodded, already looking at the chain, trying to figure out how to free the dog. "Yes, we'll take him home. But Elias, he's very sick. I don't know if—" She stopped herself. There was no need to prepare her son for the dog's death just yet. First, they had to try to save it. "He'll be okay," Elias said with absolute certainty. "I promised him." Sophie examined the padlock securing the chain to the dumpster. It was heavy and rusted, impossible to break without tools. She looked around desperately, then spotted a piece of metal pipe half buried in garbage nearby. "Stay with him," she told Elias, though there was clearly no danger of her son leaving the dog's side. She retrieved the pipe and, after several attempts, managed to slide it through the links of the chain near where it attached to the dumpster. Using the pipe as leverage, she strained against the chain with all her strength. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, with a groan of protest, one of the links gave way, weakened by rust and exposure to the elements. The chain came free, though the portion wrapped around the dog's neck remained secured by the padlock. "We did it!" Elias cried, his face lighting up, despite the grim situation. "Now he can come home with us." Sophie looked down at the emaciated dog, wondering how they were going to transport it. It was clearly too weak to walk, and though it was severely underweight, it was still a large breed. She wasn't sure she could carry it all the way back to their apartment. As if sensing her dilemma, the dog tried to stand. Its legs trembled violently with the effort, and after a moment, it collapsed back to the ground. "Don't try to get up," Elias whispered, stroking the dog's head. "Mama will carry you." Sophie took a deep breath. She had no choice. This was important to her son, and she wouldn't let him down. "Okay," she said, positioning herself beside the dog. "Elias, I need you to move back a little so I can lift him." Reluctantly, Elias released his hold on the dog and stepped back. Sophie carefully slid her arms under the dog's body, flinching at how prominent its bones were beneath her fingers. "It's okay," she murmured to the dog as it whimpered softly. "We're going to help you." With a grunt of effort, she lifted the dog into her arms. It weighed far less than it should have, which only confirmed how severe its starvation was. The dog went limp in her arms, too weak to struggle or resist. "Let's go home," Sophie said to Elias, who was watching with wide, anxious eyes. "Quickly, before the storm gets worse." They made their way back through the alley, Sophie struggling to keep her balance on the slick pavement while carrying the dog. Elias walked beside her, one small hand clutching the edge of her soaked nightgown, the other reaching up to keep contact with the dog, as if he feared it might disappear if he let go. "Don't worry," he kept whispering to the dog. "We're taking you home. You're safe now." Sophie didn't have the heart to tell him that safe might be an overstatement. The dog was barely clinging to life, and they had no resources to care for it properly. But they would try. For Elias's sake, they would try. As they approached their building, Sophie realized they couldn't use the fire escape to return to their apartment. Not with her carrying the dog and Elias so small and the metal slick with rain. They would have to use the main entrance and hope none of their neighbors saw them bringing a dying animal into the building. Luck was with them. The lobby was deserted at this late hour, and they made it to the elevator without being seen. Sophie shifted the dog's weight in her arms, her muscles burning with the effort of carrying it. The dog's breathing had become more labored during the journey, its eyes closed, its body limp. "Is he okay, Mama?" Elias asked, his voice small and frightened. Sophie couldn't lie to him. "I don't know, baby. He's very sick, but we're going to do everything we can to help him." The elevator doors opened, and they hurried down the hallway to their apartment. Once inside, Sophie gently laid the dog on the living room floor. It didn't move, didn't even open its eyes. Only the slight rise and fall of its chest indicated that it was still alive. Elias immediately knelt beside it, his small hands hovering uncertainly over its broken body. "What do we do now, Mama?" Sophie looked at the dog, at its many wounds, at the chain still wrapped around its neck. They needed to clean it, treat its injuries, get it warm and dry. But first, they needed to remove that chain. "I'll get some tools," she said, moving to the small closet where she kept a basic toolkit. "And some towels. We need to dry him off and clean his wounds." While she gathered supplies, Elias sat vigil beside the dog, whispering to it continuously. "You're safe now. This is our home. No one will hurt you here. My mama will make you better. She can fix anything." Sophie returned with towels, a bowl of warm water, hydrogen peroxide, and the small toolkit. She knelt beside the dog and examined the padlock on the chain. After several attempts with different tools, she managed to force it open with a screwdriver and a hammer. Carefully, she unwound the chain from around the dog's neck, gasping at the raw, infected wound it had left behind. The metal had worn away fur and skin, exposing flesh that was now inflamed and oozing. "Oh, you poor thing," she murmured, feeling a surge of anger at whoever had done this. "Who could do something like this to you?" Elias watched with wide, tearful eyes as Sophie gently cleaned the wound with warm water. The dog flinched but didn't struggle, either too weak to resist or somehow understanding that they were trying to help. "We need to clean all his wounds," Sophie explained to Elias, handing him a clean, damp towel. "Can you very gently wipe the dirt from his fur while I take care of the bad cuts?" Elias nodded solemnly, taking the towel and beginning to carefully clean the dog's face. The dog's eyes opened at his touch, focusing on the boy with what seemed like recognition. "See, Mama, he knows me," Elias said, his voice filled with wonder. "He knows I found him." Sophie smiled sadly, continuing to clean and disinfect the worst of the dog's wounds. There were so many cuts, abrasions, what looked like burns in some places. This animal had suffered deliberate, prolonged abuse before being left to die. As they worked, the dog's breathing became slightly less labored, and it began to respond more to their touches, turning its head toward Elias's hands when he spoke. It was still critically weak, but perhaps the gentle care was giving it a reason to keep fighting. "Mama, he needs food," Elias said, his face serious. "His tummy is all gone. Look." Sophie looked at the dog's sunken stomach and nodded. "You're right. But we have to be careful. When someone hasn't eaten for a long time, they can get sicker if they eat too much at once." She went to the kitchen, searching through their meager supplies for something appropriate for a starving dog. They had eggs, some milk, a bit of chicken left over from their dinner. She decided on the chicken, shredding it into tiny pieces and adding a small amount of water to make it easier to eat. When she returned with the bowl, Elias was lying next to the dog, his small body curled around its much larger one, his arm draped gently over its shoulder. He was whispering something in the dog's ear, words Sophie couldn't quite catch. "I brought some food," she said, kneeling beside them. "Let's see if he'll eat a little." Elias sat up eagerly. "Did you hear that? Mama brought you food. You need to eat to get strong again." Sophie placed the bowl near the dog's muzzle, but it didn't react. Its eyes were open, watching them, but it made no move toward the food. "Maybe he can't sit up," Elias suggested. "Can we help him?" Together, they gently supported the dog's head, raising it slightly from the floor. Sophie brought a small piece of chicken to its mouth, but the dog still didn't respond. Elias's face fell. "Why won't he eat, Mama?" "He wants to go to sleep forever." Sophie fought back tears at her son's perceptive words. The dog had given up. After who knew how long suffering abuse, starvation, and abandonment, it had simply lost the will to live. "Not if we can help it," she said firmly, both to Elias and to the dog. "We're not giving up on you, so you can't give up on yourself." She took another piece of chicken and held it directly under the dog's nose, letting the aroma reach it. This time, its nostrils flared slightly. Its eyes focused on the food, and its tongue, dry and cracked, darted out to lick its lips. "That's it," Sophie encouraged. "Just try a little." Slowly, hesitantly, the dog opened its mouth and took the piece of chicken from her fingers. It chewed weakly and swallowed, then looked up at them as if awaiting their reaction. Elias clapped his hands in delight. "He ate it, Mama!" "He ate it." Sophie smiled, her heart lifting slightly. "Yes, he did. Good boy," she added to the dog, offering another small piece. The dog accepted it, then another, and another. Sophie was careful to feed it slowly, just a little at a time, knowing that too much food could shock its system after such prolonged starvation. After eating a small amount, the dog's eyes began to droop with exhaustion. The simple act of eating seemed to have drained what little energy it had. "Let him rest now," Sophie told Elias, setting aside the remaining food. "He needs to sleep to heal." Elias nodded, then ran to his bedroom. He returned moments later with his pillow and blanket. Without a word, he placed the pillow gently under the dog's head and spread the blanket over its body. "There," he said, satisfied. "Now he'll be warm and comfy." Sophie looked at her son, this tiny, compassionate being who had braved a storm to save a dying animal, and felt overwhelmed with love and pride. "You have the biggest heart of anyone I've ever known," she whispered, pulling him into a hug. Elias hugged her back, then broke away to kneel beside the dog again. "I'm going to stay with him," he announced, "all night, so he knows he's not alone anymore." Sophie should have insisted he go to bed, should have reminded him of school tomorrow, of the need for sleep. But looking at the determination on his small face, she couldn't bring herself to separate him from the dog he'd risked so much to save. "Okay," she agreed, "but try to get some sleep too." Elias nodded, already settling himself on the floor beside the dog, one hand resting gently on its side to feel the rise and fall of its breathing. Sophie watched them for a moment, her son and this broken animal that had somehow found its way into their lives, then went to make coffee. It would be a long night, and she needed to stay awake to monitor the dog's condition. As she waited for the coffee to brew, she looked back at Elias and the dog. Her son's eyes were already drooping, his small body exhausted from the night's events, but his hand remained on the dog's side, keeping that vital connection. The dog's eyes were open, watching Elias with an expression Sophie could only describe as wonder, as if it couldn't quite believe that this small human had found it, had cared enough to save it. Then, as she watched, the dog's tail moved. Just a slight wag, but unmistakable. And for the first time, Sophie allowed herself to hope that perhaps, just perhaps, this dog might survive the night. Elias stirred slightly, opening his sleepy eyes to look at the dog. "I'll call you Hero," he whispered, "because I know you are." The dog's tail wagged again, stronger this time. And as Elias's eyes drifted closed, his hand still resting protectively on Hero's side, the newly named dog did something remarkable. It shifted slightly, painfully, to move closer to the sleeping child. Then, it laid its head down beside Elias's, their breaths mingling in the quiet of the night. Sophie felt tears pricking her eyes at the sight. Whatever happened tomorrow, whether the dog survived or not, her son had done something beautiful tonight. He had heard a cry no one else could hear, and he had answered it with pure, unflinching love. The storm raged on outside, but inside the tiny apartment, something fragile had begun to take root. A bond between a broken dog and a boy with a heart too big for his small body. Neither Sophie nor Elias could have imagined how this night would change their lives forever. Dawn broke over the city, pale light filtering through the worn curtains of Sophie's apartment. She hadn't slept a wink, keeping vigil over both her son and the dog they'd rescued. Elias had finally succumbed to exhaustion around 3 a.m., his small body curled protectively around Hero, one hand still resting on the dog's side. Sophie rubbed her tired eyes and checked the time. 5:30 a.m. Her shift at the diner started in 30 minutes, but there was no way she could leave Elias alone with a severely injured dog. She'd have to call in sick, risking her job in the process. But what choice did she have? As she reached for her phone, Elias stirred, his eyes fluttering open. "Mama?" he mumbled sleepily. "Is Hero still here?" "Yes, baby," Sophie whispered. "He's still with us." Elias turned to look at the dog and broke into a wide smile. "He's breathing better, Mama." "Look." Sophie knelt beside them, and to her surprise, she saw that Elias was right. Hero's breathing had become deeper and more regular overnight. His eyes, though still clouded with pain, seemed slightly more alert as they tracked her movements. "Good morning, Hero," Elias said, gently stroking the dog's head. "Did you sleep good? We're going to make you all better today." Sophie's heart clenched at her son's innocent optimism. The dog was still in critical condition, its wounds severe, its body ravaged by starvation. They needed professional help they couldn't afford. "Elias, I need to make a phone call," she said. "I'm going to stay home with you and Hero today." Elias's face lit up. "Really, Mama? You don't have to go to work." "Not today," Sophie confirmed, already dialing the diner's number. Her boss answered on the third ring, his voice gruff with sleep. "Tom, it's Sophie. I'm so sorry, but I can't come in today. My son is—" She hesitated, not wanting to lie, but knowing the truth would sound absurd. "He's not well. I need to stay home with him." There was a long pause on the other end. "This is the third time this month, Sophie," Tom said finally, his voice hard. "You know the policy." Sophie closed her eyes, her stomach sinking. "I know. I'm sorry. It's just, if you're not here by 6, don't bother coming back at all." The line went dead. Sophie stared at her phone, tears welling in her eyes. She'd just lost her job, the job that barely kept a roof over their heads and food on their table. "Mama?" Elias's voice was small and worried. "Are you crying?" Sophie quickly wiped her eyes and forced a smile. "No, baby. I'm just tired. Let's check on Hero, okay?" She knelt beside the dog, gently removing the blanket to examine its wounds in the morning light. Some of the smaller cuts had begun to scab over, but the deeper ones, especially the raw circle around its neck, still looked angry and inflamed. "We need to clean these again," she told Elias, "and try to get him to eat a little more." As they tended to Hero's wounds, the dog seemed more responsive than the night before. It flinched at their touch, but didn't pull away, and its eyes followed their every movement. When Sophie offered it some more chicken, it ate with slightly more enthusiasm, though still slowly and carefully. "See, he's getting better," Elias exclaimed, his face glowing with happiness. Sophie wished she could share his certainty. The dog was fighting, yes, but it needed antibiotics for its infections, proper nutrition to combat the starvation, and possibly surgery for some of its deeper wounds, none of which they could provide. A sharp knock at the door made them both jump. Hero's reaction was immediate. A low growl rumbled from its throat, and it tried to push itself up on trembling legs. "Shh, it's okay," Elias soothed, placing a gentle hand on the dog's shoulder. "No one will hurt you here." Sophie approached the door cautiously. They rarely had visitors, especially this early in the morning. Looking through the peephole, she saw a man she didn't recognize, tall, rugged, with a weathered face and sharp eyes. "Who is it?" she called through the door, keeping her voice steady despite her unease. "Name's Owen," the man replied. "I'm looking for a dog, German Shepherd. Been told it might be in this building." Sophie's blood ran cold. Was this the person who had abused Hero and left him to die? Had someone seen them bringing the dog into the building last night? "There's no dog here," she lied, her hand reaching for the chain lock to make sure it was secured. "Ma'am, I've been tracking this dog for days," the man insisted. "I'm a retired K-9 officer. The dog is dangerous and needs to be returned to its handler." Behind her, Sophie heard Hero's growl intensify, though it was still weak. Elias whispered to the dog, trying to calm it. "I told you, there's no dog here," Sophie repeated, her voice harder now. "Please leave." There was a pause, then. "I heard a growl, ma'am. I know the dog is in there. I'm not here to cause trouble. I'm trying to help." Sophie hesitated, torn between fear of this stranger and the possibility that he might actually be able to help Hero. If he was truly a retired K-9 officer, he might have connections to veterinarians, resources they desperately needed. "Mama?" Elias called from behind her. "Hero's scared." The man outside must have heard him. "You've named him Hero? That's good. That's what he is. A hero. Please, let me see him. I promise I'm not here to take him back to the people who hurt him." Something in the man's voice, a raw sincerity, made Sophie's decision for her. She unlocked the door but kept the chain in place, opening it just enough to see the man's face clearly. "How do I know I can trust you?" she demanded. Owen reached slowly into his pocket and pulled out a worn badge, holding it up for her to see. 20 years with the K-9 unit, retired last spring. I've been tracking cases of police dogs being abused by their handlers. Hero is one of them." Sophie studied his face, looking for any sign of deception. Finding none, she closed the door, removed the chain, and opened it again. Owen stepped inside, his eyes immediately finding Hero and Elias on the living room floor. His face darkened at the sight of the dog's condition. "Jesus," he muttered, approaching slowly. "They did a number on you, didn't they, boy?" Hero's growl subsided as Owen knelt a few feet away, making no move to touch the dog. Instead, he spoke softly, his voice taking on a soothing cadence that seemed to calm the animal. "You know him?" Sophie asked, hovering protectively near Elias. Owen nodded grimly. "Not personally, but I know his story. He was part of a new training program, showed incredible promise, intelligence, loyalty, all the right instincts, until they started the attack training." "Attack training?" Sophie echoed, glancing at Hero, who was watching Owen with wary eyes. "They train K-9S to bring down suspects on command," Owen explained. "But Hero wouldn't do it. He'd chase, he'd corner, but he wouldn't bite. Not even the padded training suits. He just wouldn't hurt people." Elias looked up at this, his eyes wide. "Because he's good," he said simply. Owen's weathered face softened as he looked at the boy. "That's right, kid. He is good. Too good for the job they wanted him to do." "So, they did this to him?" Sophie asked, her voice shaking with anger. "Beat him, starved him, and left him to die because he wouldn't attack people?" Owen's jaw tightened. "His handler, Carter, has a reputation for fixing difficult dogs. His methods are extreme. When Hero still wouldn't comply, Carter likely decided to make an example of him. Discard him like trash to show the other handlers what happens to failures." Elias's face crumpled at these words, and he buried it in Hero's fur, his small shoulders shaking with sobs. "Why did they hurt him, Mama? He's good." Sophie knelt beside her son, pulling him into her arms. "Because some people don't deserve love," she whispered, her voice breaking. "They don't understand goodness when they see it." Elias pulled back from her embrace, his tear-stained face suddenly fierce. "Then we'll love him extra," he declared. "We'll love him enough to make up for all the meanness." Owen watched this exchange with something like respect dawning in his eyes. "You're a brave kid," he told Elias. "Not many adults would have done what you did." "How did you find us?" Sophie asked, still not entirely sure she could trust this man. "I've been monitoring police frequencies," Owen explained. "Last night, someone reported a woman and child carrying a large dog into this building. Given the area and the description, I thought it might be the dog I've been looking for." He reached into his jacket and pulled out a small first aid kit. "I brought some supplies, antibiotics, proper bandages, some high-calorie food supplement for severely malnourished dogs. May I?" Sophie nodded cautiously, and Owen moved closer to Hero, speaking to the dog in that same calm, reassuring voice. To her surprise, Hero didn't growl or try to move away. Instead, he watched Owen with cautious acceptance as the man began examining his wounds more thoroughly than Sophie had been able to. "The neck wound is the worst," Owen said, gently probing the raw flesh where the chain had been. "It's infected, but not as badly as I feared. The antibiotics should help with that." He looked up at Sophie. "You did a good job cleaning these wounds. You might have saved his life." "It was Elias who saved him," Sophie corrected, squeezing her son's shoulder. "He heard him crying when no one else could." Owen looked at the boy with newfound respect. "You've got special ears, kid, and a special heart." Elias beamed at the praise, then his face grew serious again. "Can you help Hero stand up? He's too weak." "Let's see what we can do," Owen said, carefully applying antibiotic ointment to Hero's wounds and wrapping the worst ones in clean bandages. Then he took out a syringe and a small bottle. "This is an antibiotic," he explained to Elias. "It will help fight the infection so Hero can get stronger." Elias watched wide-eyed as Owen administered the injection with practiced ease. Hero barely reacted, his eyes fixed on Elias as if drawing strength from the boy's presence. "Now, let's try to get him to eat something more substantial," Owen said, taking out a tube of what looked like paste. "This is specially formulated for dogs who are severely malnourished. It has all the nutrients he needs to start regaining his strength." He squeezed some of the paste onto his finger and offered it to Hero. The dog sniffed it cautiously, then licked it from Owen's finger. He continued feeding Hero small amounts until the dog turned his head away, indicating he'd had enough. "Good boy," Owen praised. "That's enough for now. We'll give him more in a few hours." "Will he be able to stand?" Elias asked anxiously. Owen considered the question. "Let's give it a try, but don't be disappointed if he can't just yet. He's very weak." Together, they gently positioned themselves on either side of Hero, supporting his weight. With their help, the dog struggled to his feet, his legs trembling violently with the effort. "That's it," Owen encouraged. "You can do it, boy." Hero stood for perhaps 5 seconds before his legs gave out, and he collapsed back to the floor. Elias's face fell, and he looked close to tears again. "Hey, that was great for a first try," Owen said quickly. "Much better than I expected, honestly. He's a fighter." "Like me," Elias said proudly. "Mama says I'm small but mighty." Owen chuckled. "Your mama's right about that." Sophie, who had been watching this interaction carefully, finally allowed herself to relax slightly. Owen seemed genuinely concerned for Hero, and his medical knowledge was clearly helping, but there was still the matter of her lost job, their precarious financial situation, and the question of what would happen to Hero once he recovered. "What happens now?" she asked Owen. "To Hero, I mean." Owen's face darkened. "Carter will be looking for him, not because he wants him back, but because he doesn't want evidence of his cruelty walking around. If Hero recovers and someone connects him to Carter, they'll try to take him away?" Elias asked, his voice small and frightened. Owen hesitated, clearly not wanting to scare the child. "They might try," he admitted finally, "but we won't let that happen." "Promise?" Elias demanded, his blue eyes intense. "I promise, kid," Owen said solemnly. "I've been building a case against Carter for months. Hero could be the evidence that finally brings him down." Sophie wasn't sure how to feel about this. On one hand, bringing a criminal to justice seemed right. On the other, it put her son in potential danger. "We should get him to a vet," Owen continued, changing the subject. "I can help with the basics, but he needs a proper examination, maybe some fluids." Sophie's heart sank. "We can't afford a vet," she admitted. "And I just lost my job because I couldn't go in this morning." Owen's eyebrows rose. "You missed work to care for a dog you found in an alley?" "For Hero," Elias corrected firmly. "His name is Hero." Owen smiled slightly. For Hero, he agreed. That's something special, ma'am. Sophie, she corrected. And this is Elias. Well, Sophie and Elias, I might be able to help with the vet situation. I know someone who works at a clinic across town. She helps me with the abused K9 cases I track. She might be willing to see Hero for free. Hope bloomed in Sophie's chest, but she tamped it down quickly. Why would you help us? You don't even know us. Owen looked at Hero, his expression softening. Because this dog deserved better than what he got. Because your son was brave enough to save him when adults who should have known better turned a blind eye. And because I've seen too many good dogs destroyed by bad people. He reached out and gently stroked Hero's head. The dog leaned into his touch, a small gesture of trust that brought tears to Sophie's eyes. Let me make a call, Owen said, standing up and taking out his phone. He stepped into the kitchen to make the call, speaking in low tones that Sophie couldn't quite make out. While he was gone, Elias whispered to Hero, "Did you hear that? You're going to see a special doctor who will make you all better." Hero's tail thumped weakly against the floor, once, twice. It was the strongest response they had seen from him yet. Owen returned a few minutes later, his face cautiously optimistic. My friend Lisa can see him this afternoon. She's clearing her schedule, but we need to figure out how to transport him. He's too weak to walk, and I don't think he'd do well on public transportation. We could carry him again, Sophie suggested, though the thought of carrying the large dog all the way across town was daunting. I have a better idea, Owen said. I have a friend with a car who owes me a favor. Let me make another call. This time when he returned, he was smiling. Transportation's arranged. They'll be here in an hour. In the meantime, let's try to get Hero to drink some water and maybe eat a little more. They took turns offering Hero small sips of water from a shallow bowl. The dog's paws shook so much that he spilled most of it, soaking the blanket beneath him. It's okay, Elias soothed, gently wiping the water from Hero's face with his small hands. You're trying your best. As if in response, Hero slowly lifted his paw and placed it on Elias's lap. The gesture was so deliberate, so clearly intentional that Sophie gasped. Mama, did you see that? Elias exclaimed, his face alight with joy. He put his paw on me. Owen nodded solemnly. That's a big deal. It's the first sign of trust. He's choosing to touch you, to connect with you. Elias beamed, carefully placing his small hand over Hero's paw. I trust you too, Hero, he whispered, and I'll never ever hurt you. The hour passed quickly as they continued to care for Hero, cleaning his wounds again, offering him water and small amounts of food, and simply sitting with him, talking softly and letting him grow accustomed to gentle human contact. When a knock came at the door, Sophie tensed, but Owen checked through the peephole and nodded. It's my friend Mike with the car. He opened the door to admit a tall, lanky man with kind eyes and a ready smile. So, this is the famous Hero I've been hearing about, Mike said, kneeling to get a better look at the dog. Poor guy's been through hell. But he's getting better, Elias insisted. He ate food and drank water and put his paw on my lap. Mike smiled at the boy. Then he's in good hands. Let's get him to the vet so he can get even better, okay? Together, the adults fashioned a makeshift stretcher using a blanket, gently lifting Hero onto it. The dog whimpered softly but didn't struggle as they carried him carefully down to the waiting car. I need to get some things for us, Sophie told Elias once Hero was settled in the back seat with him. We might be at the vet for a while. She ran back upstairs to grab her purse, a change of clothes for Elias, and a few small toys to keep him occupied. As she was about to leave, her phone rang, the diner's number flashing on the screen. Her heart pounding, she answered. Hello? Sophie, it's Tom. Look, I was hard on you earlier. You're a good worker, and I know you're doing your best as a single mom. If you can make it in for the evening shift, we'll forget about this morning. Sophie closed her eyes, relief washing over her. Thank you, Tom. I'll be there, I promise. Everything okay with your boy? Tom asked, his voice gruff but concerned. Sophie looked out the window at the car below, where Elias sat in the back seat, his small hand resting on Hero's head. It will be, she said softly. It will be. She hung up and hurried back downstairs, climbing into the back seat beside Elias and Hero. As the car pulled away from the curb, Elias looked up at her with worried eyes. Mama, what if the vet can't make Hero better? What if he's too sick? Sophie put her arm around her son's shoulders, drawing him close. Then we'll know we did everything we could, she said honestly. But Hero is strong, like you. He's fighting to stay with us. Elias nodded solemnly, then bent to whisper in Hero's ear. The dog's tail thumped weakly against the seat, confirmation that despite everything he'd endured, he wasn't ready to give up. In the front seat, Owen and Mike exchanged glances, moved by the bond forming between the boy and the dog. Neither of them knew what challenges lay ahead, what dangers might still threaten Hero's recovery. But in that moment, in the warm cocoon of the car, there was hope, fragile but undeniable. And sometimes, hope is enough to keep fighting. Has anyone else ever found a stray animal and felt that immediate connection? That unspoken bond that tells you this meeting wasn't just by chance? The veterinary clinic was small but clean, tucked away on a quiet street in a part of town Sophie rarely visited. Lisa, Owen's friend, was waiting for them at the door when they arrived, her face somber as she watched them gently lift Hero from the car. "Bring him straight back," she instructed, holding the door open. "I've got an exam room ready." Elias walked alongside the makeshift stretcher, his hand never leaving Hero's fur. "Are you a dog doctor?" he asked Lisa, his eyes wide with hope and fear. Lisa smiled down at him. "I am, and you must be the brave boy who found this guy." Elias nodded solemnly. "His name is Hero. He was tied to a dumpster, but he's good. He just needs help." "Then he came to the right place," Lisa assured him as they carried Hero into the exam room. The examination was thorough and, at times, difficult to watch. Hero whimpered as Lisa probed his wounds, drew blood for testing, and took his temperature. Elias stood at the dog's head the entire time, whispering encouragement and stroking his ears. "The good news," Lisa said finally, "is that his vital signs are stronger than I expected, given his condition. The infection isn't as widespread as it could be, thanks to your quick first aid. There's no sign of internal bleeding, which is another plus." "And the bad news?" Sophie asked, bracing herself. Lisa's expression grew grave. "He's severely malnourished. You can see every bone in his body. The wound around his neck needs special attention. The skin is damaged down to the muscle in some places. And he's dehydrated, which is complicating his recovery." "But you can fix him, right?" Elias's voice was small but determined. Lisa knelt to look the boy in the eye. "I'm going to do everything I can," she promised. "But Hero has a long road ahead of him. He'll need to stay here for a few days so we can give him fluids through an IV and monitor his recovery." Elias's face crumpled. "But he'll be all alone." "I'll check on him every day," Owen assured the boy. "And so can you and your mom when you're able." Lisa nodded. "Visitors are good for recovery, but right now, the most important thing is getting him stable." For the next several hours, they watched as Lisa and her assistant set up Hero with an IV drip, cleaned and properly dressed his wounds, and settled him on a comfortable bed in a quiet corner of the clinic. Hero was too weak to do much more than watch them with wary eyes, but he no longer flinched when they touched him. Progress in its own small way. "I have to go to work soon," Sophie told Elias gently as the afternoon wore on. "But Owen has promised to stay with Hero until visiting hours are over, and Mrs. Peterson from downstairs said you can stay with her tonight." Elias looked torn, clearly not wanting to leave Hero, but understanding that his mother had no choice. "Can I say goodbye first?" "Of course," Sophie said, leading him over to where Hero lay. Elias knelt beside the bed and put his face close to Hero's. "I have to go now," he whispered, "but I'll come back tomorrow. You have to eat and drink and get strong, okay? I'll be so sad if you don't." Hero stared at the boy for a long moment, then lifted his head just enough to lick Elias's cheek, a promise of his own. Tears filled Elias's eyes, but he smiled bravely. "Good boy, I'll see you tomorrow." As they prepared to leave, Owen pulled Sophie aside. "I'll cover the vet bills," he said quietly. "Don't argue. It's the least I can do. This dog's suffering is partly on me, on all of us who suspected Carter's methods but didn't do enough to stop him." Sophie wanted to refuse, her pride rebelling at the thought of charity. But Hero needed help she couldn't afford, and her son's heart would break if the dog didn't recover. "Thank you," she said simply. Owen nodded. "I'll pick you and Elias up tomorrow after your shift. We can come visit Hero together." Sophie paused at the door, looking back at the broken dog who had so unexpectedly entered their lives. "He's going to make it, isn't he?" Owen followed her gaze. If sheer determination counts for anything, then yes, He's fighting hard, for himself, and for your boy. The next 3 days fell into an exhausting routine. Sophie worked double shifts at the diner, trying to make up for the hours she'd missed. Elias stayed with Mrs. Peterson during the day and spent evenings at the clinic with Hero, never leaving the dog's side until visiting hours ended. True to his word, Owen came by every day, often bringing small toys or treats that he claimed would help with Hero's rehabilitation. Sophie wasn't sure if that was true or if Owen simply couldn't resist spoiling both the dog and Elias, who was quickly growing attached to the gruff ex-officer. On the 4th day, something miraculous happened. When Sophie and Elias arrived at the clinic, they found Hero standing on his own, wobbling, unsteady, but standing. His legs trembled with the effort, but the determination in his eyes was unmistakable. "Hero!" Elias cried, rushing forward. "You're standing! You're so strong!" The dog's tail wagged weakly at the sound of the boy's voice, and he took one shaky step forward, then another. On the 3rd step, his legs gave out, and he collapsed to the floor with a whimper of frustration. "It's okay," Elias soothed, kneeling beside him. "You did so good. 3 whole steps." Lisa, who had been watching from the doorway, smiled. "He's been trying all day. Every time we come in to check on him, he's struggling to get up. I think he's determined to show you how hard he's working." "Can I help him practice?" Elias asked eagerly. Lisa nodded. "Gentle support under his stomach might help him balance, but don't let him overdo it. He's still very weak." For the next hour, Elias worked patiently with Hero, supporting the dog's weight as he practiced standing and taking a few steps. Each time Hero managed to stay up a little longer, take one more step, Elias praised him extravagantly, his face glowing with pride. Sophie watched, marveling at her son's patience and the dog's determination. There was something powerful happening between them, a bond forming that went beyond simple affection. Hero was fighting to recover not just for himself, but for the boy who had saved him. "He wants to make you proud," she told Elias as they left the clinic that night. "Did you see how he kept looking at you, checking to make sure you were watching?" Elias nodded solemnly. "He's trying really hard, Mama. Just like I try hard at school, even when the letters get all mixed up." Elias struggled with dyslexia, a battle that often left him in tears of frustration. Sophie squeezed his hand. "That's right. And you never give up, just like Hero isn't giving up." The improvement continued over the next few days. Hero graduated from the 4th to eating solid food on his own. Small amounts at first, carefully monitored to ensure his starved body could process it. The wound around his neck began to heal, pink scar tissue forming where raw flesh had been. On the 7th day, Lisa declared that Hero was stable enough to go home. "He still needs special care," she warned Sophie. "The antibiotics need to be continued for another week, and he shouldn't overexert himself. But I think he'll recover faster in a home environment, especially with Elias." Sophie hesitated. Their apartment was tiny, their budget stretched to the breaking point even before adding dog food and medication. But one look at Elias's hopeful face made the decision for her. "Welcome to the family, Hero," she said softly. Elias threw his arms around her. "Thank you, Mama. Thank you, thank you, thank you." Owen drove them home, Hero sitting on the back seat between him and Elias, more alert now, taking in his surroundings with cautious interest. When they arrived at the apartment building, Hero managed to walk inside on his own, though slowly and with frequent pauses to rest. "Look at you, walking all by yourself," Elias encouraged, staying close to the dog's side. "You're the strongest, bravest dog ever." Inside the apartment, Hero sniffed around cautiously, reacquainting himself with the space he'd first entered as a dying animal a week before. He moved carefully from room to room, Elias trailing behind him, until they reached the boy's bedroom. There, Hero paused, looking at the small bed with its worn blanket, the same blanket Elias had placed over him the first night. Then, with deliberate care, Hero circled once and lay down beside the bed, as if claiming his spot. "That's right," Elias said, delighted. "You sleep right there, next to me. I'll keep the bad dreams away." That night, Sophie was awakened by an unfamiliar sound. She lay still, listening intently, then realized what it was. Silence. No tossing and turning from Elias's room, no muffled crying. Her son, who had suffered from nightmares since his father left, was sleeping peacefully for the first time in years. Curious, she crept to his door and peered inside. Elias was indeed fast asleep, one arm dangling off the bed to rest on Hero's back. The dog was awake, his eyes reflecting the moonlight from the window. He was on guard, watching over the child who had saved him. Sophie's eyes filled with tears at the sight. Somehow, this broken dog had found the strength not just to survive, but to protect, to give back the love that had saved his life. The next few weeks brought steady improvement. Hero gained weight, his fur began to shine, and the haunted look in his eyes gradually faded. He still had scars, some physical, others invisible, but he was learning to trust again, one day at a time. Elias took his responsibility as Hero's caretaker seriously. He hand-fed the dog each meal, carefully measuring out the portions Lisa had recommended. "You need to eat it all," he would insist when Hero tried to turn away. "Just one more bite, please, Hero." And Hero, who surely understood the word please by now, would obediently take one more bite, then another, his eyes never leaving the boy's face. Sophie researched everything she could about caring for formerly abused dogs, spending her rare free moments reading articles online at the public library. She learned about trigger signs, rehabilitation techniques, and the importance of consistent, gentle handling. One evening, as she was preparing dinner, she watched Elias attempting to teach Hero to shake paws, a simple trick that the dog seemed reluctant to try. "It's okay if you're scared," Elias was saying, his voice patient. "We can try something else." Sophie was about to suggest a different activity when Hero slowly, hesitantly raised his paw. It hovered in the air for a moment, trembling before gently coming to rest on Elias's outstretched hand. Elias's face lit up with such joy that Sophie had to turn away, her eyes suddenly wet. Such a small gesture, a dog offering his paw, but she understood the magnitude of that trust. Hero was choosing to reach out, to connect, despite everything humans had done to hurt him. Owen visited regularly, bringing supplies and checking on Hero's progress. He seemed genuinely impressed by the dog's recovery. "He's a different animal," he remarked one afternoon, watching Hero and Elias play a gentle game of tug-of-war with a rope toy. "I wasn't sure he'd ever trust humans again after what Carter did to him." "He trusts Elias," Sophie said. "Completely." Owen nodded thoughtfully. "That's the thing about kids. They love without judgment, without reservation. Hero knows that Elias sees him exactly as he is and loves him anyway." "Do you think Carter is still looking for him?" Sophie asked quietly, the question that had been weighing on her mind. Owen's expression darkened. "I haven't heard anything through my contacts, but men like Carter don't like loose ends. An abused dog that can be traced back to him is a liability." Fear clutched at Sophie's heart. "Should we be worried?" "Just cautious," Owen advised. "I'm still building my case against him. When it's strong enough, I'll take it to internal affairs. Until then," he trailed off, his meaning clear. Until then, Hero, and by extension, Elias, might still be at risk. That night, after Elias was asleep, Sophie double-checked all the locks on the doors and windows. The thought of anyone threatening her son or the dog he had come to love filled her with a cold rage she'd never experienced before. "We'll protect each other," she whispered to Hero, who sat alert at her feet, as if sensing her unease. "All of us." Hero looked up at her, his eyes clear and steady now, no longer clouded with pain and despair. He leaned against her leg, offering his own silent reassurance. They were in this together. Days turned into weeks. Hero's physical recovery progressed steadily, his body filling out, his strength returning. The rehabilitation of his spirit was slower, marked by small victories and occasional setbacks. Loud noises still sent him cowering into corners. Men who resembled Carter could trigger trembling episodes that sometimes lasted for hours. But with each passing day, these reactions became less severe, less frequent. Elias proved to be an instinctive trainer, somehow understanding exactly how to help Hero overcome his fears. When thunderstorms made the dog tremble, Elias would build a fort of blankets and pillows where they could hide together, the boy reading stories aloud until the storm passed. When Hero balked at walking near